Welcome everyone to today's Town of Chatham Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. The date is March 23rd, 2023. This meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording the meeting, please let us know. Pursuant to Governor Baker's July 16, 2022 signing of an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, including the extension of his March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law until March 31st, 2023. This meeting of the ZBA is being conducted via in-person and remote participation and shall afford adequate alternative means of public access via Microsoft Teams by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410. Then you have to punch in the conference ID number, which is 230-485-600, and then hit the pound. Or you can join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. Despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access, and we will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. In accordance with town policy, the public can speak to any issue or hearing or business item on the agenda during the meeting when recognized by the chair. So we need a roll call by all members to authorize this hybrid form of meeting. I'll start with, please give your name and whether you say yes or no.
James Upson, yes.
Lee Hovey, yes.
Paul Semple, yes, I approve.
David S. Nixon, I approve.
Randy Potash, approve.
Virginia Fenwick, I approve.
David H. Veach, I approve.
Okay, very good. For those who are regular viewers, you might notice we have a brand new member today, Virginia Fenwick, and we welcome you, Ginny, as she goes by both names, believe it or not, and welcome and thank you again for wanting to donate your time to the town of Chatham. It's well worth the effort, so thank you.
Thank
So
you,
we have-
Mr. Chairman.
Lee's only one meeting old, so this is great. Gives us new blood and a new reason to move forward. So, let me read some more of this. If any citizen or non-board member participates in the call via the phone, please give us your name and the last four digits of your phone number for ID purposes. The way the meeting will be conducted, we start by the hearing notice, which is read by the lady to my right. This is Sarah B. Clark. She's the PPO for the town. That's the principal permitting officer. After that, then we would have the individual who made the application or appeal appear in front of us and give a presentation. Sometimes they have a representative do it. In fact, most of the time they do. Then, following that, I would ask for anybody in favor of the appeal or application who wishes to speak to join the meeting, either here in person or on Microsoft Teams. I would then, after all that, I would then read any and all correspondence that we had. Then I would ask for anybody, either here or in Microsoft Teams, who wishes to speak either against or as a specific question to do so, join the meeting. When all that's done, we might have some rebuttal testimony. And then we would have questions from the board of anyone who has been participating in this application. When that's all done, we would close the hearing and go into deliberation. Deliberation is strictly for members of the board, unless a member of the board introduces into the discussion someone who has participated in the previous. After that, we'd have a vote. And the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you need a supermajority to be successful. That means, in our case, with 4 votes, you need 4 yes. 3 doesn't do it. And that's the way it is. And there's no exceptions, except there are 2 exceptions, but I won't go into that because it has nothing to do with today's meeting. So, who's voting today? We have Buck, Paul, myself, Randy, and Dave. It's possible Dave might have to leave early, is that correct? In which case, Lee would take his place. It is possible that Buck might have to leave early, in which case, Jenny would take his place. All right, with all of that, I've been asked to review just what the process is when we receive from Sarah the packet of the applications or appeals, whatever we might have, that we have in the meeting. What happens? Well, we all go out and take a look at it, not together, because that would be against the open meeting law. You can go with one other person, but that's it. You go out and you look at the situation. You actually go to the location where whatever is going on, and then you say, you make observations and all that, then you come back, and through this meeting, there's a presentation by the applicant themselves or their representative, and you hear the argument as to why you should vote yes. Then, as you've heard, there's an opportunity for those who want to say no or have questions to participate also. Then we ask questions, and then we have deliberation, and then we come to a meeting of the minds, then we come to a conclusion, and that's how we arrive at how we as individuals vote.
Dave, you might mention also that we received correspondence.
Thank you very much, Paul. We do, which we have an opportunity to read in advance, and in some cases, we actually read it here. So, not all cases.
David, one other thing, it's not exactly related, but it is related. I've always felt when I go out to a site, I make a judgment call whether it's a seasonal house and nobody's there, or there are occupants in the house. Under those conditions, I approach the front door and knock and introduce myself, instead of just going through the back gate and wandering around somebody's backyard.
Well, we hate to see your name on the police blotter, so that's a great idea. And I think we all,
It would solve a lot of problems.
we'd have to hire Randy to bail us out. Anyway, so that's how it works. And we also have with us today two staff members. We have Chantel Kilkenny, who takes the notes here and produces the minutes and does several other things. And someday you'll have to give me a list of all the things you do, Chantel, but I don't know. But then we have our building commissioner, Jay Briggs. The interesting thing about being the building commissioner in this town is there's no commission. So I still can't figure that out, but that means you are the commissioner and the commission all rolled in one big ball, which is great. So thank you both for joining us. And with that, Sarah, let's go to 23-011, please.
Would you like the minutes of February 23rd first?
No, not really. Oh, but Paul would. Okay, Paul.
I'll move to approve the minutes of February 23, 2023 as published.
And Dave Veach seconds.
All right, we need to vote on that.
Buck says yes.
Paul,
All votes yes.
Randy,
Yes.
Dave?
Dave Veach votes
And I vote yes. I keep trying to avoid that, but that's all right. Okay, Sarah, let's try 23-011.
Application number 23-011, Town of Chatham, care of Theodore Keon, 261 George Ryder Road, Chatham, Mass. 02633. Owner of property located at 613 Stage Harbor Road, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 13A, Block 2, Lot 24. The applicant seeks to replace access stairs as allowed by special permit under Section 4A3A of the protected bylaw. The lot contains 1.31 acres in a municipal zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 9, and Section 8D2B of the Chatham Protective Bylaw.
Welcome, Ted.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. As Sarah just described, this is the project to replace essentially what is already in existence at the site. Sarah, if you could, I just want to give a very brief history lesson of a previous permit request that was granted a few years ago. And the screenshot plan that's up there now, this was during the reconstruction of the entire bulkhead system, or at least the southeastern facing section of the bulkhead, and new float system at the Old Mill Boatyard. At that time, we had included a new stair system as part of that overall permit and construction project. The stairway, as well as some of the floats, required a special permit, all of which was granted at the time. When that project went out to bid, we were budget restricted. We were not able to fund the entirety, and unfortunately at the time, the stair system was removed for the budget reasons. So fast forward, those permits that allowed the stair system in that location have expired, including a special permit through zoning. And frankly, subsequent discussions with various boards and committees after that, the conclusion came to, even though the stair system was highly desired to be replaced, instead of placing it on that outboard face on the flats, frankly, let's just put it back where the existing system is, which is where Sarah has her hand. So that is what we have now come forward with, a redesigned plan in the location of the current system. It is actually a slightly smaller footprint with less structure in the water intertidal zone, but the purpose is exactly the same, to reestablish an existing access to the very, very popular clam flats in that general area for both commercial and recreational shell fishermen, as well as other folks that just want to go walk along the shore. Stair systems and access of this nature are essentially a requirement when, through the Chapter 91 process, when structures are created along the shoreline that theoretically deny along-shore access. So having access of this nature, is something that we need to provide to the general public. So if that's a good enough introduction as to the purpose, I'll get right into the criteria provided through Section 8, C4. And if I may, I'll just start with the first one. Adequacy of the size of the site in terms of size for the proposed use. Obviously, the site, the Old Mill Boatyard, is a public access facility. We are providing a very modest replacement of an existing stair system to provide essentially exactly the same purpose as it currently is. So there should be no issue relative to the size of the existing site. Similarly, criteria 2, suitability of the site for the proposed use. I will probably be repeating this a few times. This is a public access location for water access for the general public. So this is both, a very suitable purpose and, as I already indicated, a requirement through the Chapter 91 regulations. So this is a replacement of an existing and very appropriate for this site. Impact, criteria 3, impact on traffic flow and safety. Essentially, this is exactly recreating what is there now. There, frankly, would be no change from current use. And from a safety perspective, it's actually going to be a substantial improvement. The stair system there now, Jay probably, cringes if he were to look at it. It's not code compliant, it's deteriorating, and it is very much in need of replacement. And this new system will be a much preferred system for that. Criteria 4, impact on neighborhood visual character, including views and vistas. There are no buildings or structures that would impact any vistas or views, I don't believe, in any way. Again, it's a recreation of an existing stair system, so there should be no impact whatsoever on criteria 4. Number 5, adequacy of sewage disposal, water and drainage, et cetera. I assume this is a not applicable criteria for this type of a project. Similarly, number 6, adequacy of utilities and other public services. No utilities are necessary for this. So I would consider this a not applicable criteria. Criteria 7, noise and litter. Again, no change from current use. We do have trash receptacles nearby that are used by everyone at the facility. So this should be no change in impact of a noise or litter at all. Criteria 8, compatibility of the proposed use with surrounding land use. Once again, fully compatible public access facility, providing public access to the shore, recreation of what is already in existence. Criteria 9, impact on the natural environment, including slopes, vegetation, wetlands, groundwater, and water bodies. This has been designed with all of those issues taken into consideration. As I indicated at the beginning, this is actually a project that was already approved with these various criteria, and this current project is actually smaller in overall footprint than the previous proposal, and it has already been through the CONSCOM And they have approved it with appropriate conditions to address all of those issues. So I think we are fully compliant with criteria 9. And then the final criteria, impact on neighborhood and town visual character of any formula business establishment. Once again, I believe that would be a not applicable criteria. So in my effort to be brief for you folks, I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you very much, Ted. Is there anyone here today or on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak in favor of this application? If so, please indicate you'd like to speak.
I see no one that wishes to speak in favor.
Then I'll read the correspondence. The first is dated March 15th. It's from the Conservation Commission, Paul Whiteman, Acting Conservation Agent. The Conservation Commission held a public hearing on February 8th, 2023 and February 22, 2023. The proposed project was issued in order of conditions on March 2nd, 2023. The project as proposed has been conditioned to meet the performance standards under the Wetlands Protection Act and the town of Chatham, I think, local wetland bylaw, and so on forth. Then we have a memorandum. This would be from Renee Gagne. She's our shellfish constable here in Chatham. She writes on March 6th, the Shellfish Division is in full support of the proposed project to replace the existing timber access stairs. The adjacent tidal flat is an important resource area for both commercial and recreational harvesters. The current condition of the access stairs is in a dangerous, degraded state, and replacement is vital to ensure continued and safe access to the flat. Thank you for your consideration. That's the extent of the correspondence. Is there anyone here today on Microsoft Teams who would like to speak against this or has a specific question? If so, indicate now you'd like to join the meeting.
I see no one that wishes to speak in opposition or has a question.
Okay, I'll then say to the board, does anyone have a question on this?
I do not have a question, but I do have a comment. Ted, I would direct your attention to C-102 of Coastal Engineering Company in their submission. Under General Notes number 2, it makes reference to the contractor performing the work in accordance with the plan specifications and the order of conditions issued by the Sandwich Conservation Commission. We should make a revision to that, I assume, on the final documents.
That would be an accurate assessment.
Thank you.
That's a cut and paste issue that we come across obviously often with issues like this.
Very good.
All right. Jay, you didn't bring that with you from Sandwich, did you? No.
I did not.
Okay. Okay.
All right, I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds.
Need a vote on that? Buck?
Buck votes yes, but we didn't have any conditions for parking.
Well, we can get them.
No, I'm
Oh,
fine.
okay.
Paul votes yes.
Randy votes yes.
Dave Veach votes yes.
And I vote yes. So deliberations, Buck?
No problem.
All right, Lee?
No, no problem either.
Paul?
Looks like an improvement, upgrade, and certainly meets our criteria, so I would be in favor of it.
Randy?
I'm in favor of anything Ted wants to do because he has the best interest of the town at all times.
Okay.
I
My
support
God.
it.
And I agree with all previous.
Okay, there we go. All right, conditions. I don't think, parking has nothing to do with the stairs, so.
I don't think the parking is an issue. I
Nope.
guess the question would be, when do you plan to do this, Ted?
I'm wrestling with that. Our goal had been to try to get it in prior to the season. I'm going to be working with the engineer. There are still some additional permitting forms, approvals rather, through the state that should be forthcoming shortly. And then we're just going to have some in-house discussions whether we want to try to squeeze it in. It should be a very quick project construction-wise, but whether we want to try to fit it in perhaps before the season starts is something that we're still wrestling with. Otherwise, we will, do it early fall at the latest.
I guess I don't see any need for any conditional conditions, so I'll move to approve the application as submitted.
Dave Veach seconds.
We need a vote on that. Buck?
Buck approves.
Paul?
All approves?
Randy?
Approve?
Dave?
Dave Veach
And
approves.
I approve. That's a unanimous vote. Thank you very much, Ted.
Thank you, folks. I appreciate it.
Okay, Sarah, 23-012, please.
Application number 23-012, Susan B. Hamel, care of William G. Litchfield Esquire, 330 Orleans Road, North Chatham, Mass. 02650. Owner of property located at 16 Scallop Terrace, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 16A, Block 28C, Lot H14F. The applicant seeks to enlarge, extend, or change a nonconforming dwelling on a nonconforming lot via the demolition of the existing dwelling and the construction of a new dwelling. The existing dwelling is nonconforming and it is located 18 feet from the road, 13.5 feet from the northerly abutter, 5 feet from the easterly abutter, 5.6 feet from the southerly abutter, and entirely within the Coastal Conservancy District floodplain elevation 13. The proposed dwelling will be nonconforming and that it will be located 18.1 feet from the road where a 40-foot setback is required. The dwelling will be 13.5 feet from the northerly abutter. The deck will be 3.6 feet from the northerly abutter, 5 feet from the easterly abutter, 6.2 feet from the southerly abutter where a 25-foot setback is required, and entirely within the Coastal Conservancy District where a 50-foot setback is required. The existing building coverage is 674 square feet, and the proposed building coverage is 674 square feet, where 2,800 square feet is the maximum allowed. The lot is nonconforming in that it contains 0 square feet of buildable upland where 20,000 square feet is required, and contains 2,556 square feet of land area where 40,000 square feet is required in the R40 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 6 and 9, and Sections 5B and 8D2B of the protective bylaw.
Mr. Litchfield.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Bill Litchfield here on behalf of the applicant, Susan Hamill, who may be with us virtually. With me today is Bernadette McLeod from Ryder and Wilcox, who did the design for the proposed reconstruction of the home, which Susan has owned since 1988 or 98 or 99. She's owned it for virtually a quarter of a century. When you went down there, and those of you who have been on the board or in town generally are aware, there have been a lot of changes to the Little Beach Horns Cottage area, necessitated by the vagaries of time, but also particularly necessitated by the flood zone rules. Whenever you make any sort of significant alteration to the property, which increases the value by more than 50%, you have to move the living area out of the flood zone, because everything below Chatham, virtually everything below Chatham Beach and Tennis Club is in the flood zone. Anytime you do anything to those houses of any significant cost, which in current days is doing anything, you have to elevate the living area out of the flood zone. Sue has been thinking for a number of years about making some changes to the house. It's very small, 674 square feet, and she has thought for a long time about increasing that a bit. So we are proposing today to demolish and rebuild, but to do so on the exact footprint. There will be no lateral expansion of this house whatsoever. Now, when you went down Seagull Road, when you took the sort of left fork, you saw on your left some parapets and a great massive structure that was unfortunately approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals a couple of years ago. What we are proposing is the antithesis of that. This is simple and straightforward. It does not expand the lateral footprint at all. It is, as designed by Bernadette, a simple cape, albeit two-story structure with a gable on the road side. It's really not much of a road, but it is a road as shown there. The front, the top picture is what will face Scallop. And as you know, from having been down there, 2 or 3 of the houses on Scallop have already been expanded and necessarily elevated. We're not expanding, we're simply elevating. So it's a simple proposal. It'll go into the criteria as to adequacy of site, including building cover and setbacks, like the entire neighborhood. We have an undersized lot, which is entirely in the floodplain. It's a small lot with a small footprint, but was certainly adequate when it was built in 1947. If you approve the special permit, the site will remain adequate for the new home. the footprint of which, again, remains exactly the same, but is required whenever you undertake improvements. We're raising the living area above the flood elevation. As to compatibility of size with the neighborhood was developed with small summer cottages, many of which have been or are in the process of being rebuilt since the development in the 1940s. If you approve the special permit, as shown in the third page of the handout, it will remain compatible with its surroundings. Its gross floor area and living area is consistent with those which now have second stories. The footprint, again, remains unchanged with 674 square feet. There's a 450 square foot second floor, which means a total of just 1,100 square feet, so it remains a modest home. As to the extent of increase in nonconformity, Sarah necessarily read an exhaustive list of nonconformities. There is no increase whatsoever. All of those nonconformities, being the floodplain, lot size, street, and sideline setbacks, are unchanged. We're simply going up, but we're below the height limit. As to suitability of site, the site has been developed for residential use since just after World War II. This proposal has had a thorough review by the Conservation Commission, and as the chair will read later, an order of conditions has already been issued. I believe it was issued by the Chatham Commission rather than that of Sandwich, but you can confirm that. Mr. Semple can confirm that when we get to that point. As to scale, sighting, mass, views, and vistas, and effect on streetscape, the existing house, a simple cottage, speaks for itself. What we are proposing is fortunately not a gambrel. It is a traditional Cape Cottage design with a gable on the street side, a shed dormer in the rear. I think it's an attractive and a thoughtful design for the location. The streetscape, such as it is not an issue. There is an elevation. You have a smaller, reduced copy in front of you, but that gives you a feel of what is there. It evokes what is there now with the second floor. As to compatibility of use, it's a residential use. That won't change. Just adequacy of water and sewer. We have town water and a shared Title V two-bedroom septic system. The chair will read a letter from the Board of Health indicating that they have no concerns. There's no impact on traffic flow and safety, although having a garage, something about which this board has a degree of appreciation, having a garage will assist with a tight parking at the end of the lane. There are no noise or litter issues, nor are utilities at issue, but sort of related to utilities, so that we don't run afoul. As shown on the plan, there is currently a non-conforming air conditioning unit on the deck side of the house. We're proposing to relocate it. It will still be non-conforming, but we're proposing to have, it'll probably be mini splits, and we may be able to put some of the units in the attic, but I simply want to note that it is shown. I don't recall, Sarah, whether it was in the legal ad or not, but it is shown on the plan. As to the extent of lateral expansion, and parenthetically, this is a criteria which applies. It's often forgotten, but the bylaw was revised a few years ago, and there was another special criteria for changes in the flood zone, and that is the extent of lateral expansion and the resulting impact from that lateral expansion on pervious area. We have no lateral expansion whatsoever. It's not expanding laterally, and therefore the lateral expansion has no impact on the pervious area of the site. So the issue, as you know, is whether replacing the existing structure with a new home on the current footprint, moving living area necessarily out of the floodplain and with the appropriate flood vents and a modest 450 square foot second floor, whether that is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing non-conforming structure on a non-conforming lot. The new house will not expand any nonconformities in any way, and is consistent with, but I think you can find rather more modest than, some of the changes that are both desired by the homeowners and required by the building department and FEMA in Little Beach neighborhood. Admittedly, it's a challenging lot, just as all of the Horns Cottages lots are challenging given their size, but Sue determined not to seek any lateral expansion and to instead have her design team, Bernadette, and the other folks at Ryder and Wilcox generate a plan reflecting the traditional cottage style that is now there, but with somewhat modestly greater living area. I think they've accomplished that. So in light of the criteria in the plans, I think that you can find that the proposed new home is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, but is instead a modest and appropriate home which is both responsive to the demands of the site in terms of flood zone and an improvement. Certainly be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone here in the audience or in Microsoft Teams that would like to speak in favor of this application? If so, please indicate now you'd like to join the meeting.
There is no one that wishes to speak.
Then I'll read the correspondence. The first we have is from Christina Bassett. It's dated March 23rd. She says the Chatham Historical Commission heard 16 Scallop Terrace and found the home not historically significant. Therefore, a demolition delay was not imposed. Then we have a note. This is from, dated March 15th. This is from Paul Whiteman, the acting conservation agent, Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission held a public hearing on October 26th, 2022, and November 16th, 2022. The proposed project was issued an order of conditions on November 21st, 2022. The project as proposed has been conditioned to meet the performance standards under the Wetlands Protection Act and the local wetland bylaw. Then we have a memo. This is from Judith Giorgio. She's the health agent for the town of Chatham. On 3/22, she writes, "I've reviewed the plan to demo the dwelling of the property. The existing dwelling is connected to a shared septic system. The proposed plan will not increase the septic flow to the existing dwelling and therefore acceptable at this time." Then we have a letter. This is from Jim and Kathy Caruso. It's dated October 16th. Hello. We're writing this letter in regard to the property at 16 Scallop. We're in full support of the project of raising and replacing the existing dwelling. We are the owners of 8 Scallop and have known Susan since 1999. At the time of this purchase, none of us were aware of what was to come, including the break of South Beach and then a perfect storm scenario in 2018 that caused flooding in the area. Susan, similar to us, is trying to protect her investment as well as enjoy this area that we all love so much. She is following the FEMA requirements as well as the town of Chatham's guidelines. Again, we are in full support of our project and are available to answer any questions. And that is the extent of the correspondence. Is there anyone here on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak either against or has a specific question? If so, please indicate you'd like to join the meeting.
I see no one that wishes to speak in opposition or has a question.
Okay, then I'll ask the board for if they have any questions. We'll start with Lee.
I do actually have one question. As to the northerly abutter, the lot, is that owned by somebody? Is that a town lot?
I don't have the assessor's maps in front of me. I believe that may be owned by the Conservation Foundation. It is not buildable because there's no new building allowed in the area.
Okay, thank you.
Paul?
I have no questions.
Randy?
No questions.
Jenny?
No questions.
Dave?
I have no questions.
And I have no questions.
And I don't. Okay, Paul?
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds.
Need a vote? Buck?
Buck approves.
Paul?
All votes yes.
Randy?
Approve.
Dave?
You chose yes.
I approve. Deliberations, Paul?
Well, I think it's certainly an improvement that makes sense, given the current conditions with FEMA and the flooding we've been having down at Little Beach. So it seems consistent with our standards and not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood.
Randy?
Meets the criteria, and I support it.
Jenny?
It meets the FEMA requirements. I think it's an improvement. It's a big investment for the homeowners to be doing this project to protect the value of their home, so I would support it.
Dave?
Yeah, I agree with all the previous, it's a nice-looking design, and at least on this street and in some of the surrounding properties, it's a nice example, as are some of the others we've approved, of a change that is inevitable, but it's well done, and I want to comment on that. So I will be supporting it.
Buck?
I also will support it.
Lee?
I agree with everything that's been said. I think it's a really nice design. I think it's going to be a great improvement.
Paul, what about conditions?
Well, what's the plan, Bill, in terms of construction?
I think at this point, I don't know whether, if I could ask Bernadette, I think we would anticipate doing this after Labor Day at this point.
I think they want to take it down as
soon as they get a building.
Bernadette, I'm sorry, buddy.
What she, if you want to come up, Bernadette, but my understanding of what she said is that the applicant or contractor might want to take it down, demolish it now, and then go forward in the summer. Go forward after the summer. I cannot give you a definitive answer. Mr. Chairman, if you could inquire whether Ms. Hamel is here, perhaps she could respond to timing.
Okay, great. Ms. Hamel, you on there? We think you are.
Yeah, I believe she is. Sue, if you can sort of unmute yourself, and you may be on mute as to possible or proposed timing.
Oh, that, you hear me?
No, we can't.
Just barely.
Oh, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm sorry, I'm not very good at this. I'm sorry, I don't know how to,
No, you-
Well, okay. So, Paul,
Well, it seems to me that we probably could go with our normal conditions.
the normal conditions that we put on the last two in Little Beach?
Yes. Because those were specific for two particular projects, right?
That's correct, and we should do the same for this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sarah, can you read those, please?
So it would be all construction activity to be contained on-site and construction vehicles to be contained on-site or off-site with the permission of the property owner. Between June 15th and September 15th, no exterior construction will be allowed. No work shall be permitted on the weekends, and construction activity will be between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. only.
Anybody have any,
I think all that's, I would just comment that, I don't think that provided that the work was accomplished beforehand, I don't think anyone in the neighborhood would be unhappy with the existing building being demolished before the summer. So I don't think we should, I think we'd be okay with that.
yeah, and that's kind of like outside construction, right? Or destruction?
That's right.
Right,
That's happens quickly and.
Right, okay.
It's gone.
If I could, if that occurred, that would not be a problem with those conditions.
No, as long as it was before
Yeah,
June 15th.
Exactly.
I'll move to approve the application with those conditions.
Dave Veach seconds.
Need a vote, Buck?
Buck approves.
Paul
approves.
Approve.
Dave Veach approves.
I approve, that's a unanimous vote. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Mr. Litchfield. Okay, Sarah, 23-013, please.
Application number 23-013, Gregory P. Manning and Jennifer L. Manning, care of William F. Riley Esquire, P.O. Box 707, Chatham, Mass. 02633. Owners of property located at 356 Deer Meadow Lane, also shown in the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 7J, Block 48, Lot C, 312. The applicant seeks a dimensional variance from the abutters setback requirement under Appendix 2 of the protective bylaw for the installation of an exterior mechanical system appliance generator. The generator was installed 20.3 feet from the easterly abutter where a 25-foot setback is required. The lot contains 19,719 square feet in the R60 zoning district. A dimensional variance is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 10, and Section 8D2C of the Chatham Protective Bylaw.
Good afternoon, Bill Riley on behalf of Gregory and Jennifer Manning. This is Jennifer Manning with me here, in case you have any questions. So this is a situation where the Mannings retain the services of a contractors to install a generator. And unfortunately, they didn't go to get a permit until after the generator had been installed. So that's when they learned there was a 25-foot setback in that zone where the house is located. So the Mannings are seeking a variance because of the cost involved in relocating the generator to the other side of the house. We have new people, so to qualify for a variance, the applicant must have a hardship, financial or otherwise, that arises out of the soil, shape, or topography of the lot or structure. There must be something about the property which is unique to it and generally not applicable to the zone in which the property is located. But it must not be detrimental to the public good, and it may not derogate from the purpose and intent of the bylaw. So in terms of a hardship, one of the things we've pointed out recently is that our Supreme Judicial Court has indicated that where there's merely a dimensional variance sought, even a relatively minor hardship can justify a variance. This concept is included in the case of Marashlian versus Zoning Board of Appeals in Newburyport. That was a situation where they wanted to build a hotel, and the town of Newburyport had requirements for parking, which the property didn't have enough room for the required parking. As you know, typically, simply not having enough room or not having the lot be large enough is not grounds for a variance. But the court found, in that case, that providing the property was economically impractical. And so they granted the variance. So the granting of the variance was upheld by the court. So in our situation, we have a trapezoidal lot where the topography, apparently, at the time the house was constructed, suggested that the house go on the highest point of the lot. At that time, this is an R20 zone, it's in River Bay, where the sideline setback at that time was only 15 feet. So the house, if you see on our plot plan, the corner of the house where the generator is located is actually a little bit over the setback line. So the gas pipe, the meter, is on that side of the house. And that's why the generator contractor installed the generator in that location. So what happens now, if the Mannings are required to relocate the generator, the piping and the wiring, the electrical panel for the house is also on this end of the house. They would have to take the pipe, run it through the house, out the other side, and the electricity has to go that way as well. And that seems simple. However, the basement in this house is fully finished. We have a picture, which Jennifer provided. Do you have the basement picture, Sarah? There you go. So as you can see, so this is a picture looking one way, and the next picture is looking the other way. But basically, you can see it's a fully finished with a drywall ceiling, and the doorway is framed out. And so the work involved to simply provide a way to put the pipe and wiring above the ceiling. The estimate that the Mannings received was $4,875 just to cut it so you could make way for the pipes and wires. Then moving the pipes from one side of the property to the other, they have an estimate to do that work for $6,500. And the electrician's bill is, oh, I'm sorry, yeah. So the basement work is 5,000. The, moving the pipe is 6,500, and the electrician's bill is $4,875. So it's $15,000 to move it to the other side. Now, the, another factor for your consideration is that in the correspondence from our neighbors, the neighbor whose property is closest to the generator has indicated that they have no objection, they support the application. The abutter on the other side also supports the application. So, you know, this is similar to a case in Brookline, Wolfman versus Zoning Board of Appeals of Brookline, where a loading dock, if it meant the requirements of the zoning bylaw, they would have to take space out of the interior of the building to make it work, which of course would reduce the value of the building and the project. And again, the court found that that economic change justified the grant of the variance. So here we have a situation where we believe that the economic cost involved in moving this makes it economically impractical. The neighbor who would be affected by this has no objection to the grant of the variance. Jennifer believes that the location of the variance where it is going to be, from a noise point of view, is more protected and less of a problem for the neighbors in general than if you put it to the other side, which is kind of a wide open, the land falls away, the other houses around it are lower and are more likely to be affected by the noise of the generator. So I think that, you know, and we believe, of course, that there's no public detriment, and we also believe that there's no derogation from the purpose and intent of the bylaw. So that would be our presentation, and I hope that you will consider those factors in thinking about the grant of the variance.
Is there anyone here today on Microsoft Teams that would like to speak in favor of this application for a variance? If so, please indicate now you'd like to speak.
Is anyone that wants to speak in favor?
And then I'll read the correspondence. First, we have a note from Judith Giorgio. She writes on March 21st. Hi, Sarah. I have no concerns or comments on this dimensional variance for the generator of this property. Then we have a handwritten note. This is from, looks like, is this Sherwin? Yes. And Richard?
Paquin, they are neighbors across.
Okay, so say the last name again?
Paquin,
Okay, thank you. Yes, they're 367.
yes.
Okay? And they write, we essentially approve the application, and so on, so seeking a dimensional variance from the abutting setback requirement for installation, a mechanical system, and then goes on, well, it doesn't. Okay, thank you, it says. And that was, they're in favor of it. And then we have this is a email, this is from, it's to Sarah, from, it looks like Sheila Howe and Richard Heinz, H-E-N-T-Z, 344 Deer Meadow. Richard and I are okay with the generator being non-conforming and not being 20 feet from the property line.
Yeah, and their property is the one that's closest their house is closest to that side of the house.
Then on March 20th, the following letter was sent, signed by Carl Kevin Zartman, Dina Rufer, Robert Wirtschafter, and Angela Sorrentino. They write, setbacks contribute to the quality of life in neighborhoods and communities. As a result, dimensional variances should not be considered, and definitely not retroactively. As generators have become more prevalent in our community, it's important the ZBA respect the expectation that setbacks be met. Unless extreme extenuating circumstances exist, dimensional variances should not receive favorable consideration. No such circumstances appear to exist in this situation. In closing, we are pleased to see that the permit application for the installation of exterior mechanical system appliances, including generators, specifically includes information about setback requirements. And those addresses include 266 Round Cove Road and 85 Monomonesset Way. And that's the extent of the correspondence. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak either against this or has a specific question? If so, please indicate now you'd like to join the conversation.
I see no one who wishes to speak in opposition or has a question.
Okay, then we have questions from the board. We'll start with Randy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, good afternoon, council and your applicant. So, I have two questions. One is, how did this happen in the first place, and who knew what when? And the second one would be, I'm just interested why your memorandum doesn't take advantage of the whole portion of the topography portion, that number one in the variances that relates to our bylaw, because our bylaw also includes, with respect to particular land or structure or building. So you only included the structure. So it's, to your advantage to tell us why it had something to do with this land, structure, or building, provide you with that element of the three conditions you need. So, sorry I wasn't particularly articulate with that, but, so part one, I want you to tell us why you have that, because I'm with you on parts 2 and 3. And one more thing, I'm not persuaded by any letters, just so you know, because they're not part of the rules of the law, so they're just interesting, so. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Jennifer Manning, I'm the homeowner of the property along with my husband Greg, who is on the, I want to say Zoom, but it's Teams. Greg is a full-time resident of the town of Chatham. How did it happen? We hired somebody, a professional electrician, and we obviously signed and executed contracts with him. And, part of that process is, as a homeowner, is anything we've done on the property is entrusting those individuals to pull the necessary permits. It was installed. The plumbing work was all done. The electrical was all done. It was put in place. And he presented himself to pull the permit and was denied for the permit. So that's how it happened. So we installed our good faith in the process, but we also, to speak towards that, the location of it was the optimal location on the property. Because it was, in a confined area behind a fence in a buffered section of the property. And we wanted to make sure from a noise perspective that we were containing that and that we didn't want it reverberating out to the neighborhood in any manner.
So you thought it was the best spot, not just for you, but for the whole neighborhood?
Yes, yep.
Also, Randy, the meter, the gas meter is at that corner of the house, so it's the shortest distance.
So it was safety. So the gas meter is a structure, isn't it?
Yes.
So why don't you tell us about why that counts?
Well, I thought I mentioned that, but I'll reinforce it. I mean, the reason why it was located there, I think, first of all, a couple of things. First of all, if you looked at the lot, the house is located, as it should be, on the highest part of the lot. So, I mean, in other words, the lot slopes away, as you're looking at the house, the lot slopes away to the left. So it would be natural to put the house on the highest part of the lot. So that's why the house is there. It was built at a time when the sideline setback was only 15 feet. So they located the house, so it's about 25 feet. But when you put a generator in, you have to locate it several feet away from the structure. So, because the gas meter was there, the house was located in the highest part of the lot, that's why it was installed on that side. And unfortunately, the installer didn't go to pull the permit until after the work was done. So,
What would he have done if he was told?
well, presumably, we would have asked for the variance before the thing was installed.
So that, you would have done that, okay.
So,
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you think that was the safest spot to put it?
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Jeannie, questions?
Well, my question was who placed the generator there? How did that happen? We answered that.
Turn on your microphone.
I'm sorry. My question was, who placed the generator there, which you've already answered that. And then another question I had was about the neighbor which I believe is on the east, right, the closest?
Yes,
Right.
Sheila and Richard, yes.
Yeah, I didn't realize that they were actually writing a letter in support of. I thought that there was another letter that was read, where they were not in support, and I thought that was the neighbor, so. And I understand what my colleague Randy is saying about the letters aren't the criteria. But I believe that a variance, a dimensional variance, goes with the land. So this isn't really a question, I guess I'm moving into deliberation, but if that's correct, that I worried a lot about the neighbor, because this is an important decision that could impact that neighbor or future neighbors, potentially the value of that neighbor's property because of the proximity of that generator and the noise. So that was my question, was one, to make sure that I understood that the neighbor closest really did not have an issue.
And I mean, I agree with Randy's statement, the letters don't matter, but the fact that the neighbor most affected
Yep.
has no objection to it, it should weigh on the scale of yes. But
So I have no further questions.
Dave?
Well, the first thing I wrote down was who did the work, and you answered that to a certain degree. I'm looking for maybe just a little more information in terms of background. How locally based was the electrician who did the work? I don't need names, I'm just curious.
so what
if
was
you
the
were-
question, Dave?
How locally based was the electrician who did the work?
Do you want me to answer?
I mean, was it Chatham, was it within
It's
20 miles?
It's within the footprint, and he's done
no.
multiple.
No, I mean,
Where does he operate
the business
It's in Yarmouth.
in, how many?
Yarmouth?
Yarmouth?
Yep, and he's done multiple generators in the
Yeah.
neighborhood.
So, yeah,
So
okay.
he's installed other generators
He's-
in the neighborhood.
He is, right, he's a generator installer from Yarmouth that perhaps because of, the unfortunate part is, had he gone for the permit before the installation, he probably would have learned about Chatham's bylaw with respect to mechanical appliances in respect to the setbacks, because my understanding is most other towns in the Cape do not have that type of restriction. So, okay, that's all I have.
Can I add to that point? But he
Sure,
has
please do.
installed other generators in Chatham, so.
He has installed,
He has.
yeah.
He actually, this generator installation was a referral from the neighborhood, so.
Okay, great, thank you.
I have a question for the commissioner. Do you have a print in front of you of the plot plan?
I do.
So if it was to be relocated north, maybe west-northwest, out back by the deck or by the pool, it looks like there's 26 and a half feet there, which means they could fit it possibly. Do they have to have a large setback from the deck? Or if it's less than, could they squeeze it in there based on that 26?
Potentially.
Potentially,
potentially.
you wouldn't have a problem with it.
No?
So my question to Attorney Riley is, why wasn't that, why isn't that a possible solution to the problem?
I guess I didn't think about it. I mean, obviously saw the setback line, but the deck, that's a patio, right?
There's a patio around the whole edge of the pool.
So they didn't want the generator immediately adjacent to their recreation spot. That's all. I mean, that's why it got put where it got put. I mean, theoretically, of course, they could move it there. But they would prefer, I mean, there's cost involved in moving it even to there, obviously considerably less than it would to move it the whole way across. But, I mean, it was located where it was located, so it wouldn't interfere with their outside spaces.
Thank you. No more questions.
Lee?
Yes, I do have a question. Is it possible to bury the utility lines, the gas, the electric, so you could go underground, maybe through the front yard and place it elsewhere?
Oh, you can. It's a lot more expensive to do that, believe it or not.
More expensive than tearing down the ceiling of the,
Well, they wouldn't, see, they don't tear it down. They just,
well,
they
whatever.
cut a section out, put the pipe in, put it back up, tape it all back together again, just drywall. So but it would actually be more expensive to trench all the way around than to go through the house.
Okay, thank you.
Paul?
Well, I think those were actually two of the questions that I had. One was relocating it more towards the pool proposed shed area, and the other was to locate it on the other side of the house. In dealing with the first criteria on the variance, you mentioned the shape of the lot, but, when I look at the town map with respect to the shape of lots right around here, they're all oddly shaped. I mean, if you look at 344 and 324 and so forth.
That's true, but the point of the lot, the part of the lot that I was emphasizing was the topography of the lot. That's why the house got placed where it is.
Well, I understand that it's a higher location at that location, but I have difficulty seeing how that in itself makes it unique within the concept of a variance. And I realize that there would be some expense involved in moving it, so I'm trying to figure out how you can decrease that expense, but you start with the concept that you've got an electrician who is installed elsewhere in the subdivision doing generators, obviously must know about the setback requirements because he's pulled other permits or people on his behalf. So that's what's giving me some pause. I don't think I have any other questions.
Mr. Riley, I don't agree with you when you say the gas line or gas meter come to the corner of the house. That's not the way I saw it. It's to the left of the corner. And I noticed that out of it, 3 separate lines ran into the house. 3 lines. So that tells me they're all going in one spot. You have a boiler, I presume, someplace in the house that would run off the gas. She might have appliances in the kitchen that run off the gas. You could very well have a laundry dryer that runs off the gas.
Well, I
And
think-
all these pipes are, except for the one going in the boiler, are approximately an inch OD. Now, I noticed in the back of your house, a gas vent for exhaust. So what kind of appliance do you have in the basement and the back of that house?
The boiler is located to the front of the house, it's not to the back of the house. The vent goes up over the ceiling in the back and out the back. So if you're looking at the house itself, right where the gas meter is, right in back of that is the boiler room. So that's where the gas line goes for the boiler, then the vent goes out from there. And subsequently, if you go up right above that, that's where the kitchen is, where the stove is, where the pipe is. So while three come in, they're coming into the same point. They're not going anywhere else within the house.
Okay, so, and all of these run up in the front of the house, correct?
Off the top of my head, they would be this way. I'm not a contractor. So they come into the house, so this way, the boiler room's here. So off the front of the house, they stop at the front of the house. There's no gas pipe that runs through the existing house. They stop right there.
But yet you vented out the back of the house.
I'm not a professional,
So you run that pipe all the way to the back of the house.
it goes through a crawl space in the basement.
And the back of the house is where the pool is and all that, correct?
That's where, that's where it is, yes.
That's
Yep.
my only question. Thank you.
I thought you said the vent was in the ceiling.
What vent in the ceiling? The vent
The
for,
vent that goes out to the back of the house,
there's
from the
a,
boiler.
from the boiler, it's in the back of the house in the ceiling.
Right,
Like
so,
it goes out through the ceiling.
I know, but to get from the boiler to that vent,
Yep,
it goes above the ceiling of the first floor?
yes.
See, so it's not in the basement, Dave. It goes up between the floor levels out to the back.
Okay, great, but it gets there. Buck, you had another question? No, I'm good. Okay, all right, I think we're set. Randy, you started questions, yes? Yeah. Okay,
Now I'm troubled. Who's right with this pipe? Because I was gonna base my vote on where the pipe is. So, and I'm thinking that the electrician was trying to be safe, and I don't think you should mess around with gas at all. That's not good for the whole neighborhood, or the whole town. So I'm trusting the electrician did a safe and proper job. But if Dave thinks that that gas pipe is not really near there, that causes me to be
No, all the gas piping is contained within one area. And the gas piping that was associated with the installation was actually signed off on by the town of Chatham for the generator. So somebody came out beforehand and actually signed off and approved the gas piping that was installed to the generator.
Yeah, but the point of, to Randy's point, and Dave's, is that the pipe is gonna have to go the entire length of the house out to the other side. It's gonna have to go above the ceiling in the basement and below the first floor and out.
Dave?
Yeah, just let me weigh in a little bit on some of this discussion. Now, I'm not an expert. I have had a couple of, and Jay, if you have anything to help contribute to this, I would appreciate. I've had a couple of generators installed, one of which was at considerable distance from the gas meter. And the size of the generator was such, was such that I had to run a 2-inch gas line all the way from the meter to let's put it this way, it added considerable expense.
That's big.
I don't think that's necessarily the case here because they have improved the size of the generators and things like that. But I know that the one that I have in my home was specifically, when it came out and when it was sited, it was close to the meter because they have to come right off the back side of the meter. They can't like tee off of, I don't think, the gas to the boiler or something necessarily. But they ideally want to locate these generators fairly close to the gas meters and fairly close to the electrical panel. So it looked to me like both of those things, it looks like the electrical panel is probably in that same boiler room in that corner of the house.
Yes, it
So
is.
the only thing, and that in looking at the plot plan and everything here, that I would say is and certainly the expense to reroute this thing to the other side of the house is considerable. The other option would be to put, and I don't think this is an ideal option, but to put the generator right in front of the house. Because that's where all that stuff is. But would have to sit in front of the main part of the house. You can't put it in front of the garage over there, everything. So I don't see that that's impossible, but it's certainly not desirable from an aesthetic or costly point of view.
I guess, I have another question, I guess, given the conversations we just had. I've got a neighbor who's got a generator that's a substantial distance from the house that's, I mean, it's not near any electrical panel, and when I went out and looked at the site, I could see the gas entryway for the house. It's on the right-hand side of the front of the house. And frankly, my thought was that if it needed to be moved, the way to do it would be to trench in front of the house and then take a right so that the generator was behind your fence on the other side of the house. And I didn't think, and I may be wrong, that that would be a super expensive job, given you the trenching kinds of equipment that they have now to go out there and do that. But so I don't see that as being necessarily a super expensive kind of arrangement to do something like that. Maybe I'm wrong. You haven't presented any figures on that, but the basic problem here is that there was not a permit pulled ahead of time. And unfortunately, that's one of our requirements in town, and it's apparently somebody who should have known that. So that makes the whole thing more difficult.
And Paul, we're drifting a little bit into deliberations.
In any case, I will move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave, seconds.
Can I make one comment? Is that acceptable? Okay, in reference to that, digging it out and trenching it from an expense standpoint, obviously, the trenching involves not only removing the irrigation system, moving that, removing the fence, so it's not just the trench component, there's other components that are associated with it from a cost perspective. And then, in consideration for the location, if you look at, and I believe I had provided a photo, the left side of the house is completely unprotected. So from a noise standpoint, this is going to have noise. Where it is placed today, it's protected, it's against a set of fence, it's against the house, and there's mature shrubs surrounding it. So it is technically the best place for it and also the safest place for it from the perspective of the closeness to the gas line and the utilities.
Jay?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something about the mechanical permit itself that we require. It's only for zoning purposes to make sure that the items meet the required setback. There's a question as to whether or not those, if you're replacing the unit that's been there prior to the bylaw adoption in 2012, I think it was 2012. Otherwise, it just says, will this meet the setback? We don't make people hire a surveyor, which can be 6-7 months out, and spend a few $1,000s to provide us with an accurate site plan to install these. We don't feel that that's right, but the electrician who works in many towns, likely, we're one of the only towns, if not the only town, that requires these appliances to meet the setback. They're saying that it's going to meet setback. We accept their word when they fill out the application. If they're going to guess at it and take a shot at it, it puts the owners in a tough situation, I understand. And I don't know how we get around this in the future. We try to cross-reference plans we have on file. We need some sort of location relative to the house so we can take an educated guess. But it's really on the part of the applicant, which in this case, I guess, was the electrician.
Thank you. You made a motion, Paul?
Yes, I move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds.
So we need a vote. Buck?
Buck says yes.
Paul?
All votes yes.
I vote
Yes.
Yes?
And Dave Veach votes yes.
Okay, that's, all right. So deliberations. Jeannie, it would be terribly unfair to have you start on your first day unless you wish to.
I'll make a few comments. It is my first day, so keep that in consideration. So I mentioned before that my concern was with the easterly abutter. The proximity seemed really close to me, and you had all that property on the other side. But there has been considerable discussion today, which I honestly didn't know anything about generators. I don't have one yet. I think what it comes down to is, it appears to me, that this is a hardship on the homeowner when they didn't make the mistake. And I think that is, again, it's my first day, but I've been watching prior tapes, I'm reading future information, and we're seeing that come up. So I think that's something that would weighs heavily, that it was not the homeowner's fault, and there would be significant hardship. It sounds like that's been established. So I would probably support it.
Dave?
Yes, I agree with that. I mean, I think that, so we could say, well, the installer, we can send this back, but then, there's no way that this doesn't involve a hardship to the homeowner, even if the installer took full responsibility for it. It's a hardship of trying to negotiate how we get blah, 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 blah. So I can accept that part, and I will, it is, the generator is a structure and, and all this. So I'm going to, maybe it's a stretch, but I can find that it meets all the criteria that are necessary to grant a variance, and I will vote for it.
Buck?
One of my shortcomings is I see a lot of things black and white, and I don't mince words. As far as I'm concerned, it's an illegal installation. I could be wrong at that, but that's my interpretation. It was created by the electrician, I guess. It could have been the pipe fitter, but I think the electrician probably, I suspect, did it. I think that if they don't get the variance, the electrician better not charge them for wherever they decide to relocate it. So it's only the cost of the gas pipe. And there was something else that I thought was, generators, in my personal experience, run for about 15 to 20 minutes a week. The rest of the time when they run, usually when it's a little cooler and there aren't too many people lying around a pool. So I got no problem not supporting it.
Lee?
Well, I will say this is kind of a tough one. I understand the contractor was at fault. He made a mistake by not pulling the permit. But from what I understand from Jay Briggs is that we're the only town around that actually requires that, to pull a permit for a generator installation. Is that correct?
We're one of the only towns that
One of-
requires a setback to such,
Okay. But you have to pull a permit regardless.
yes.
Okay.
And they also pulled gas permit and electric permit in addition to the mechanical permit that we're talking about.
I got it, okay. I don't know, and I agree with everyone's comments regarding the hardship to the homeowners. It would be a hardship. I'm really on the fence on this one, though, so I'm glad I'm not voting.
Paul?
Well, I think we all agree that there's a hardship involved here. The question really becomes one of whether it's consistent with the variance requirements. And unfortunately, we're put in the position of having to make these decisions, which is not is not always a pleasant situation to be in. Here, I'm having real difficulty finding it complying with the criteria that it owes to the circumstances relating to the soil conditions, shape, or topography of the land or structures, and especially affecting such land or structures, but not generally the zoning district in which it is located. I mean, here, even within this neighborhood, we have different topography and we have different shaped lots. And I have some trouble with the third criteria, which is that the desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent or purpose of the bylaw when a permit was not applied for prior to the installation, apparently by an electrician who has done numerous other installations in the neighborhood and elsewhere, so is presumably aware of the requirement with respect to setback. So I think on that basis, I would not be inclined to vote favorably with respect to a variance.
From my standpoint, I agree what Paul just said about the topography. It doesn't qualify. As far as the hardship goes, what we're looking at here is, and I've mentioned this in the past, we have needs and we have wants. And wants is what your client, Mr. Rowley, she wants to move it. No. She doesn't want to move it near the pool. She doesn't want to move it to the other side. But it's not a need to keep it there. There are plenty other places for it. In the front, you know, you don't want to run another pipe around, fine. Put it in the pump. Front, put it on the side, like Buck said. This is small money. It isn't the huge money you're talking about. And those 3 lines that go in there, and I hear what your client says about what happened, it could easily be run right to wherever. And you don't want to run it in the ceiling through your rooms to the other side of the house, fine. That's your call. But I can't see that the hardship should be yours, the electrician, and I don't want to mention things like malpractice, E&O, products liability, completed operations insurance, all these things come in. And so I don't see why you should have to pay a dime if this person put it there by himself. So,
You know, but Dave, there are some zoning boards that would say, you know, nobody's objecting. So why don't we just grant it and see what happens? It's amazing.
I understand you, and they don't read the letters either, I understand. So you've heard what the story is. Paul?
I'll move to approve the application as submitted. Oh, excuse me. I move to approve the application as submitted.
How do you vote, Buck?
Dave each seconds.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you, dear. Buck?
I'm not in favor of supporting the variance.
Good, then you say no.
No.
Thank you. Paul?
All votes no.
Randy?
I never got to say why, but I would have voted yes. And I think it meets all the criteria, easy.
Dave Veach?
Dave Veach votes yes.
And I vote no. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. I thought you got it out. I thought you got it out. Okay. All right, good.
Sometimes you have to sit on.
Okay, so moving along. Sarah, let's see if I can add here. 23-014, please.
Application number 23-014, Douglas C. DeStabler and Susan B. DeStabler. Care of William G. Litchfield Esquire, 330 Orleans Road, North Chatham, Mass. 02650. Owners of property located at 60 Eastward Road, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 13M, Block 15, Lot C34. The applicant seeks to enlarge, extend, or change a nonconforming dwelling on a nonconforming lot via the construction of a screen porch. The existing dwelling is nonconforming in that it is located 39.9 feet from Eastward Road and 38.1 feet from Old Salt Works Road, where a 40-foot setback is required, and 33 feet from the Coastal Conservancy District floodplain elevation 11, where a 50-foot setback is required. The proposed screen porch will comply with the setback requirements. The existing building coverage is 3,391 square feet, and the proposed building coverage is 3,701 square feet, where 2,900 square feet is the maximum allowed. The lot is non-conforming in that it contains 23,169 square feet, where 40,000 square feet is required in the R40 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 6, and Section 5B of the protective bylaw.
Mr. Litchfield.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Bill Litchfield here on behalf of Doug and Susan DeStabler. I see that Doug is with us, and perhaps Susan is as well. I will be relatively brief because you've already had sort of a taxing afternoon and you have several more hearings. The DeStablers own this house out at Eastwood Point, rather. Oh, boy, that was a terrible slip to make. Out at Eastwood Point for a number of years now. And they would like to construct a seasonal sun porch on the rear side. The lot, like virtually everything at Eastwood Point, is non-conforming, and they have excess coverage because the existing house was built under prior zoning when they could have 25% coverage. There's the proposed screen porch, 20 by 15.5 square feet on the rear. From having been out there, you know that while it's a corner lot, the location is shielded by a hedge. You can't really see it from Old Salt Works Road, which is the side road, and Eastwood Road out front. You can't see it at all because it is behind the house. So what is proposed, maybe Sarah could bring up the elevation in addition to the site plan, is shown there. A simple screen porch built on where it had been a patio. When you went out there, you saw the patio is being reconstructed at present as well. So as to adequacy of site, including building coverage and setbacks, we have a relatively large lot, a site which is adequate for the existing home built under prior zoning, notwithstanding its proximity to the street, the flood zone in the northwest corner, and coverage. We're not in the flood zone. We're not even within 100 feet of it. I think you can find that this site is adequate for what is shown there. The addition on the rear of the house, increase in coverage by 310 square feet, but 85 feet from one street and 40 feet from the closest abutter. Parenthetically, the two abutters who were affected, the one beyond the house on Eastwood Road and behind the house, have written in support of this proposal. It is, again, behind a hedge. As to compatibility of size with the neighborhood is created under prior zoning. The current house, while substantial, is certainly not inconsistent with nearby properties. If you approve the special permit, it will remain compatible in an area of ample homes, but it's at the rear, it's not visible from the street, and it is in a private location. As to the extent of increase in nonconformity, we have those which Sarah enumerated in the hearing notice. The sole increase is in coverage, again 310 square feet, but no other increase. It won't increase living area either. As to suitability of site, the site has been developed for residential use for a half century. Impact on natural environment, again, we're more than 100 feet from the flood zone, and the existing and we're on an existing developed lot or a patio. As to scale, sighting, mass views, and vistas, as with the other homes in the neighborhood, it is a sizable home, but it's certainly well suited to the location. The scale and the mass of the house are not impacted by the addition of a screen porch at the rear. Again, it's behind a hedge without impact on the streetscape. There are no views or vistas at issue. As to compatibility of use, it's a purely residential use. We have town water and a Title V system. There are no bathrooms or bedrooms involved with the sun porch. The other criteria are not at issue. So the question, as you know, is whether the proposed addition of a screen porch on the rear is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the current non-conforming structure on a non-conforming lot. Plainly not a small house, but the somewhat marginal change, 300-odd square feet of porch, in this location, I think is less than suggested by the coverage number and is far less than one which would create a detrimental effect on the neighborhood. Tellingly, again, the neighbors at the rear at 43 Old Salt Works Road and next door at 76 Eastwood Road, the only ones who might be able to see it have written in support. And again, I appreciate that you make the decision, not butters, but these have been considered in light of their proximity, and I think that has some merit. So in light of the criteria and the plans on this location, you can find the proposed small addition and resulting increase in coverage in this location, in this neighborhood, is not substantially more detrimental. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone here on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak in favor of this application? If so, let us know right now.
I see no one that wishes to speak in favor.
Okay. Correspondence. I have a memo from Judith Giorgio. She's the health agent here in town. On 3/22, I've reviewed the plan to add a screen porch. The proposed plan does not add sewage flow, nor does it encroach on the required setbacks to the existing septic. I have no concerns. And then we have a note from, I can tell you, it's the Fentons. No? Yes, the Fentons. My husband Joe and I own the home at 43 Old Salt Works. Our neighbors, the Stablers, who own the home directly behind our home, have shared with us their plans for the construction of their screened-in porch. Based on the information, we support their plans. We feel the new porch is in keeping with the architecture of their home, will not adversely impact our home, and is consistent with the neighborhood. If there are any questions, you may contact, no, okay, this was from Pat Cusamano. That's who it actually was from. Now, this one is from Cheryl Fenton, and she's at 76 Eastwood. She writes, on March 1st, as a neighbor and a butter, I offer favorable support. The construction of this addition was not be detrimental in any way. I'm happy to support Doug and Sue as they prepared to build a room for their family gatherings. We respectfully request your favorable decision and approval of this application. Thank you for your consideration. That's the extent of the correspondence. Is there anyone who's here or in Microsoft Teams that would like to speak against or has a specific question or anything negative?
I see no one that wants to speak in opposition or has a question.
Okay, then questions from the board. Ginny?
I have no questions.
Dave?
I have no questions.
Buck?
Buck has no question.
Lee?
I have no questions.
No questions.
No questions.
No questions.
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds.
Need a
Buck
vote?
approves.
All approves?
Approve.
Dave Veach approves.
That's unanimous. So, deliberations, Dave?
This certainly is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. It meets all of our criteria. It's a nice addition to the property, and I will support it.
Buck?
And I agree with the former speaker.
Lee?
I agree as well. I think it's going to be a lovely addition.
I also agree.
I also agree, and I wonder if this is where they're gonna film the movie, because it's gonna be up there somewhere.
Not quite enough square footage, I don't think, Randy, but what do you think? Ginny?
I don't have anything additional to add. Well, except I did note, I think this chart is very handy, and this was an easy one because it didn't impact any of the abutters except for one, and it was still within the setback, so.
Okay. Okay.
I'll move to close the hearing and move
We
into
did.
deliberations.
We
We did that already. Okay.
Now, how about a motion?
How about a motion? I'll move to approve the application as submitted. I don't see a need for conditions in this,
I don't think
given this location and the project itself.
You know,
No, I
probably take
think
about
we'll
a
just-
day to put it together.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't-
Move to approve the application as submitted.
Dave Veach seconds.
Buck votes yes.
Paul votes yes.
Yes.
Dave Veach votes yes.
Yes, unanimous decision.
Thank you.
Mr. Litchfield. Okay, Sarah, 23-015, please.
Application number 23-015, James and Jennifer Mock, care of Michael D. Ford Esquire, P.O. Box 485, West Harwich, Mass. 02671. Owners of property located at 32 Old Salt Works Road, also showed on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 13L, Block 1, Lot C32. The applicant seeks to modify special permit number 21-048, granted on June 24th, 2021, which allowed for the demolition of the existing dwelling and the construction of a new dwelling, garage with living space above, and swimming pool. The applicant now seeks to modify the special permit to allow for an overhang to be located 48 feet from the Coastal Conservancy District. The approved building coverage was 3,376 square feet, 8.2%, and the constructed building coverage is 3,416 square feet, 8.3%, where 10% is the maximum allowed. The lot contains 44,899 square feet in the R40 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Sections 6 and 9, and Sections 5B and 8D, 2B of the protective bylaw.
Mr. Ford?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Ford, representing the applicants. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you today. I'm a little bit under the weather, so I'm here remotely. So, as Sarah read, this is a request to modify the MOC's existing special permit to reflect what is actually constructed on the ground at this time. And I think, Sarah, if you could bring up the of the elevations, which was the fourth attachment we sent over to you with our application. Well, we could start with these plans if you'd like. So, Mr. Chairman, this is the existing and approved special permit plan. And where Sarah has the marker, you'll see the distance from the edge of the Coastal Conservancy District, which here is the floodplain and not the top of the coastal bank, so it makes it closer to the house, was 50 feet. And that's how it was marked, and that's how it was presented to the board. Now, Sarah, if you'll go to the proposed site plan. You'll see on the proposed site plan, measuring from the same spot, you now get 48 feet. So how did that happen? There was an overhang that was shown on the architectural plans that were approved by the board and made part of the application. And Sarah, maybe here we could go to the elevations. And I think the best shot of this for the board is elevation A6, the last one in the grouping.
Give me 1 second, Mike, because that was not part of this application, so I'm just going to pull up the old, the 2021 special permit.
Okay. It was the fourth attachment of what we sent over to you, if that helped at all to get at it. So I think A6 is the one we want to look at.
Do you want to be part of this?
That's it there. So that's the southwest corner of the building. And it is that overhang there that was shown on the plan and approved that was constructed, but it actually is 2 feet 8 inches. And so under the current requirements from the building department, an overhang that's over 2 feet, and this is over it by 8 inches, is counted both in terms of setback and building coverage. And neither of those are reflected in the current special permit. So in meeting with the building commissioner about this, notwithstanding the fact it's shown in these architectural plans, it was not shown on the site plan, because I showed you the site plan, and the site plan shows 50 feet to the house. They did not call out the on the site plan the overhang, because I don't think anybody was aware at the time of the presentation that it was 2 feet 8, even though it's scaled to 2 feet 8. So the house is built, the overhang is built in accordance with the architectural, but the site plan and the language in the decision don't match up. And so the building inspector requested, and we agreed, to come back and seek a modification of the special permit to clear the issue up. Now, what effect does it have? On building coverage, it moves the building coverage, if you count the overhang now, because it's 8 inches over the 2 feet, you end up with an increase in the building coverage from 8.2% to 8.3%. However, the building coverage in the area is allowed to go up to 10%, so that doesn't create any non-conforming condition. If the overhang is counted from the Coastal Conservancy District and you measure to that rather than to the house, which is what the site plan did, then you end up short. You end up at 48 feet rather than 50 feet. The reason this is brought as a special permit is that the house that this replaced was located in the coastal conservancy setback, and we removed that entire house out of the setback when you approved this new house. So this is really a correction as a result of the omission on the site plan of the overhang that you're looking at there. So with that, Mr. Chairman, maybe I could go to the criteria.
I really don't think it's necessary, Mr. Ford.
Okay.
Yeah, but thank you for the offer. No, the only thing I'm gonna, are you done? Because all I want to do is just see if the building commissioner would like to add his 2 cents, and then we'll go on. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay. Jay?
Thank you. I had talked to Mike Ford about this when this issue came up at first and said, you know, we look at setbacks on site plans. That's one of the main purposes of the site plan is to see what the setbacks are. And they did have some overhangs indicated on that site plan, but they didn't have any shown in this area. So typically, a typical eave would be less than 2 feet. We don't need those shown on a site plan. They're typically not shown on site plans. So the as-built came through, showed the eave at 2.8, showed it closer to the floodplain Conservancy District line, and so that's why we're here tonight.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there anyone here today or on Microsoft Teams who wishes to speak in favor of this application? If so, indicate now you'd like to join the discussion.
I see no one that wishes to speak in favor.
And I'll read the correspondence, which is none. So, is there anyone here or on Microsoft Teams that would like to speak against this or has a specific question? If so, please indicate now you'd like to join the discussion.
There is no one that with a question or to speak in opposition.
Okay, we have questions from the board. Buck?
Buck has no questions.
Lee?
I have no questions.
Paul?
No questions.
No
Randy?
questions.
Ginny?
No questions.
No questions.
Nor do I.
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds.
Need a vote?
Paul votes yes.
Yes?
Dave Veach votes
I
yes.
vote yes. Deliberations? Lee?
I don't really have any comments to make.
I should vote in favor if,
If I were voting, yes, I would vote
okay,
in favor.
good.
I think Mr. Ford's explanation is a good one, and it shows where things went awry, and I don't think there's any problem with it, and I think it does satisfy our criteria. It's not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, so I will vote yes.
I agree with Paul, and I think Mr. Ford did a great job. He did a better job sick than some people do well.
I agree with Paul's comments and Randy's comments. It was very clear, Mr. Ford, thank you for that. And if I were voting, I would vote yes.
And I also agree with all previous and will support it.
Buck?
So I'll repeat, it's not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, so it's a go.
Okay. Well, I guess we don't need any conditions, huh, Paul? It's already
I
built.
can't think of a single condition, by golly. I'll say I move approval as submitted.
Dave Veach seconds.
All
Buck
right, need a
approves.
vote? Yeah, Paul?
All approves?
Approve?
Dave Veach approves.
I approve. That's a unanimous decision, Mr. Ford. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Too bad Mr. Litchfield's presenting. Oh, we'll get that long letter. No, I'm not.
Okay, Sarah, we're on to 23-001, please.
Application number 23-001, Robert Fogel and Ellen Mahoney, care of James McGrath, 259 Queen Anne Road, Harwich, Mass. 02645. Owners of property located at 9 Power Lane, also shown in the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map, 9K, Block 18, Lot LP 9. The applicant seeks a dimensional variance from the abutter setback requirement under Appendix 2 of the protective bylaw for the construction of an accessory structure, pool house. The pool house was installed 22 feet from the southerly abutter where a 25-foot setback is required. The lot contains 20,535 square feet in the R60 zoning district. A dimensional variance is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 10, and Section 8D2C of the Chatham Protective Bylaw. This was continued from February 9th, 2023 and February 23rd, 2023.
Okay, Mr. Litchfield, before you start, I should say that Mr. Upson has to leave. So the voters on this will be Lee, Paul, myself, Randy, and Dave.
Dave, it is possible if I get notice here that I may need to leave
Okay, if
before we
you
get
have
to.
to, then Jenny will take your place.
If I have to leave beforehand.
Fine,
yeah,
understand.
but that's-
Okay, yeah, we're all set. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bill Litchfield here on behalf of the applicants, Bob Fogel and Ellen Mahoney. Bob is here with us. And also, I want to give credit to two neighbors who have been here for almost 2 hours to speak on behalf of this application, and they will have a chance to do so. First, we appreciate the board's indulgence in continuing the matter unexpectedly at the last hearing. I was not able to be present. I was brought into this after the application was filed, and we appreciate your cooperation in that regard. And I'm going to take a moment, even though it's late, because this is important for a number of reasons. When I started practicing law, I was in court 3 days a week. I no longer go into court, and no single judge on Cape Cod has complained about that fact. But one of the things that I recall from when I went into court was that a lawyer's job is to educate the judge. And you are the judges today. And I want to, particularly so because we have a couple of new members, one of whom is voting, so I hope you'll indulge me if I do a little attempt at educating. Variances, as you know, are to be granted sparingly. They require all of three things: a finding that owing circumstances relating to soil conditions, shape, topography of land or structures, and especially affecting that land or structures, but not generally the zoning district, that a literal enforcement would involve substantial hardship, financial or otherwise, and that desirable relief may be granted without detriment to the public good and without nullifying or derogating from the purpose of the bylaw. Some judges have said that it would be a good thing if all nonconformities were to end. Well, that's not true. It would involve the end of the, I mean, if you read the Mass Continuing Legal Education thing, you'll read quotes in cases on nonconformities and zoning boards of appeals. That's simply wrong when it applies to Chatham, where the history of the zoning is complex. It would mean leveling of the old village. So we've got lots of nonconformities. We also have peculiarities on our zoning bylaw. Some people think that variances should never be granted, but that ignores both law and common sense. So some of you who've been on this board longer than others will recall Kevin McDonald, our building inspector, prior to building inspectors and zoning commissioners prior to Jay. He was of a mind that virtually any relief could be provided by a mere special permit, which, as you know, is fairly easy to obtain. That was the way we operated before the Dedrick case in 2014. So I want you to look for a moment at the single sheet that I presented, which shows the history of variances and special permits in Chatham. If you go back to the 1980s, go look at the top, the very top line. In 1982, 18 special permits were requested, 32 variances were requested, and 21 of them were allowed. That trend, if you'll call it that, or that status continued till about 1997, 1998, and guess what happened? Kevin McDonald became the zoning commissioner. So variances were never unusual in Chatham. Historically, they were issued nearly as often as special permits because circumstances warranted them. That began to change a little bit in 2014, 15, and into 2017. Why? Because of the Dedrick case that said that Chatham had always said if you have any kind of nonconformity, not only could you expand that nonconformity, but you could create a new category of nonconformity. The court said that even though Chatham had been doing that for 60 years, that was the wrong way to do it. So now, some variances are requested. This is one. Variances, however, or variance, is not a dirty word, and there are cases where it's warranted. So let me tell you what happened. This is like two other cases you've heard today. The one you immediately heard a moment ago. Something was done by the builder that wasn't exactly as planned. You could modify the special permit because that was the subject of the special permit. Here, a mistake was made, or rather at least two were made, one compounding on the other. We already dealt with one of them back in January in appeal number 22-125 as to the placement of the pool. This lot isn't rectangular, and the pool was cited incorrectly. That was done because of a flare in the lot, and there's a copy of the plot plan in the package that I gave you. Pine Harbor, Jamie McGrath, the owner of Pine Harbor, is here, used the siting of the pool to place the house. And that resulted ultimately in it being 22 feet from the lot line rather than 25 feet from the lot line. If that pool house, if that building could be picked up and moved, that would have been done already. If it were easy, we would have done it, but the drainage, the electrical work, the plumbing, the gas lines, the concrete foundation, and the pool equipment are all installed, and it would require demolition of the building and starting over again. That is a hardship both to, as to expense and as to Bob and Ellen's current situation. You'll read correspondence from Bob Fogel in that regard. It would also be a hardship for the neighborhood, resulting in yet another summer of construction, as well as inability of Bob and Ellen to enjoy a house that's been in the works for almost 2 years as their eventual retirement home. It would have been far better had this matter been filed and heard together with the pool. The pool was too close to the lot line, and you granted a variance for that. But as with the location of the pool house, I can't undo the fact that the appeals were filed separately, so here we are. So let me go into the criteria. As you know, we have to prove there's something highly unusual, circumstances relating to soil conditions of the land or structures affecting this lot but not others in the neighborhood. Well, you already found in appeal number 22-125 that the lot was not consistent with the others in the subdivision. So I have great faith in the Chatham Zoning Board of Appeals, and I rely on your finding in that appeal that the lot was not consistent with others in the neighborhood, all of which are rectangular. This lot, however, this land is distinguished by something quite unlike anything else in that neighborhood. It was, until the Mahoney, Bob, and Ellen started building the house, the only previously undeveloped buildable lot in the neighborhood. And it was thus eligible for treatment under footnote number 7 of our bylaw, of Appendix 2 of our bylaw, which is about the 5th page in your handout. And that allows for setbacks of 30 feet from the street and 20 feet from the sideline. Why are we here? We're 22 feet from the sideline. An argument could be made that we shouldn't be here. We'll get to that later, but we are. That characteristic is certainly not shared by other lots in the subdivision. Now, there's another matter too, because a pool is a structure. And this pool, getting away from the part that was allowed by the variance, the very small portion, this pool is a structure. The pool house was centered on and built in conjunction with the pool. So that is a unique characteristic of this house. I'll give you the answer as to why footnote 7 apparently doesn't apply, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but Jay says that it applies only to residential buildings. I disagree. The vehicle to go forward with that disagreement is an appeal of Jay's decision, and I don't want to do that because I have respect for him. I'll get more into that later, but I know you were wondering why we're not eligible under footnote 7. I think we should be. Second criteria, literal enforcement of the provisions of the bylaw involves a hardship, financial or otherwise. As you know, a far lesser showing of hardship is required for a dimensional variance. No one factor determines hardships, rather it's a matter of discretion for the Zoning Board of Appeals. In this case, there are numerous hardship aspects. The expense, which is very considerable, a lot more than moving a generator, demolition rather than moving, disruption and noise for the neighborhood, and special circumstances in the applicant's family. Then we have to prove that desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good, without nullifying a substantially derogating purpose and intent of the bylaw. A little bit later, I'm going to read you some words of law or words written by lawyers, but I came across a quote recently said by a lawyer. Quote, Zoning Board of Appeals actions are discretionary. ZBA is designed to provide relief when it's felt to be necessary and consistent with zoning. That was in a variance case heard by this board in January, and Mr. Semple was the lawyer who said it, and I agree with him. The relief which is being sought is discretionary on the part of this board. Here, the neighborhood was built with the R20 setbacks of 25 feet from the street and 15 feet from the abutters. We are 22 feet from the abutters. Moreover, because of footnote 7, the garage is 21.8 feet from the sideline. That was permissible. This pool house is not that close to the sideline, but has run afoul of an interpretation of the bylaw, one that I do not share, but which I respect. If you grant the relief, it has no negatives for the neighborhood and is certainly not detrimental, as our bylaw says, to quote, those qualities which distinguish Chatham as a desirable community, including health, safety, prevention of overcrowding and blight, and preservation of the natural environment. On these facts, you can find that owing to circumstances relating to the shape of lot, you've already found it, and especially in light of footnote 7, that those are circumstances especially affecting this parcel which do not generally affect the R60 zone. You can also find a literal enforcement of the dimensional regulations of the bylaw would involve a hardship, and the desirable relief can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good or derogating from the purpose and intent of the bylaw. You could add conditions. You could grant the variance based on a requirement that there be additional planting along the lot line and screening of the mechanicals behind the pool house, which you can see from Power Lane. The applicant could do that. And yes, in answer to a question in the prior hearing, the applicants do own an adjacent lot, but that's not before you today. Is it de minimis? Is it small? Well, de minimis is not defined anywhere. It's a judgment call. Mr. Briggs can't ignore it. He doesn't have that discretion, but you can grant the relief. But by way of example, the bylaw allows for 30 square foot projections within the sideline zone. Since we're 3 feet too close to the lot line, and the shed is 10 feet wide, but the lot line angles, the relief we're seeking is less than 30 square feet. It's the same amount that is allowed as of right for other projections. That provides, I think, support for a finding that a variance of this size would not be viewed by the voters who created the bylaw as de minimis. It's also not self-created. An example of a self-created hardship is when a buildable tract is subdivided into several lots. I'm the developer, and I leave myself with an inadvertently unbuildable lot. I created that problem. I can't come to you for a variance for that. Or one which is created by a sale of land or other conveyance or which leaves a portion of the land too small or without access. Instead, this is much closer, I think, to the case in Cove Hill Circle about 18 months ago. The builder, and there's a nexus between our builder and the homeowner, but the builder in that case built a house that exceeded the height limit. The relief was granted to the homeowner, notwithstanding the builder worked for him, and there was indeed thus a nexus, but you understood that the homeowner would get the benefit of the variance. It was a stretch to find in that case that there was a unique shape or unique soil conditions, but your correct finding in granting the variance did no harm. It allowed the homeowner use of his property without further difficulty or delay and was granted without derogation of the purpose and intent of the bylaw. As is the case here, the neighbors weren't opposed, there was no detriment to the public good, and there won't be here either. Are there alternatives? Yes. On the second page of the handout, a couple little black lines along the lot line. We could do a land swap with the next door neighbor, if the next door neighbor were willing to do so. We could carve off 30 square feet from his lot, give 30 swap 30 square feet, because under the Chatham bylaw, you can't make a lot more non-conforming, so they'd have to remain their existing size, but we could do a land swap. That would involve an engineer. You heard a little while ago about 6 months, and you're lucky if you can get an engineer in 6 months. It would involve a plan. It would involve, God forbid, lawyers. It would involve going to the planning board. It would involve going to the registry of deeds. It would involve recording deeds. It would also require the assent of any mortgage holders, because it would be a conveyance. And what would be the result? the pool house would be just where it is now without any change. The land wouldn't change, the pool house wouldn't change, a paper line would change. There's no good, no need to do that. Footnote 7, and Jay, I'm sure you'll ask him if he shares my interpretation of his interpretation that it just applies to primary residences. Is that essentially correct? If I could.
Single-family dwellings, yes.
Single-family dwellings. Thank you. We have inconsistencies in our bylaw. The bylaw says that a structure is, quote, any combination of materials assembled or maintained at a location on or in the ground or attached to something on the ground. That's the definition of a structure. It goes on to say, including but not limited to buildings, tennis courts, swimming pools, and retaining walls. Yet we have an interpretation that says a patio is not a structure. Can you tell me with a straight face that a patio is not something, an assemblage of materials in or on the ground? I don't think so. And I think footnote 7, by its plain language, I respect Jay's opinion, and we're not going to appeal it. And it can stay in place if we don't appeal it. But I think if we did, a very strong argument could be made that footnote 7 should apply to more than single-family dwellings, single-family residences, because nowhere in the plain language of the bylaw does it say otherwise. So footnote 7 is applied to new residential structures, but not to pools or pool houses. So again, I recognize Mr. Briggs' job, and he makes the decisions. I don't want to appeal his interpretation. Nobody wants to do that. Instead, this variance can be granted. You could also decide that in light of footnote 7, no relief is required, but that would leave Jay in sort of confusing and untenable position. So the better alternative is to grant the variance. Could it be overturned in court? Yeah, it could. I'm not going to lie to you. It might be. Perhaps it would be. But that's not really a concern here because nobody opposes it. When you read the materials on variances, you hear that lots of courts overrule lots of variances. They do, but that's because someone objects. I do want to give Todd and Charlene Greenhalgh a chance to speak because they are expert witnesses. Mr. Greenhalgh's father was the zoning commissioner for the town of Chatham for a long time. Mrs. Greenhalgh was the head of our planning department and that of the town of Harwich for a long time. But before we get to them, I want to talk about two final legal matters. I went to increasingly long time ago, but I went to a law school that was originally created to provide legal education to women. It was named when it started Portia Law School. And Portia was the lawyer in Merchant of Venice. And, you know, the words of most lawyers are not memorable. Certainly that's the case with me. But Portia said something with which you'll be familiar, that the quality of mercy is not strained. And in reality here, that's what we're looking for, very simply put. There are legal bases for this request. There's also a degree of mercy involved because the cases say that when even all of the criteria are fully met, there's no right to a variance. Here, however, a variance can be granted in accordance with the law. Finally, and some of you may have heard me quote this before, but there was a fellow named Carl Nickerson Llewellyn who was a legal scholar. The Nickerson was a coincidence, not a Chatham resident. He was probably the strongest of the school of legal realism that said that formalism or mechanical application of rules really wasn't suited to life, that outcomes, circumstances, and realities had to be considered. He would have said that a Board of Appeals is a prime application or a critical to the application of law. And he said something that applies here. The rule follows where its reason leads. Where stops the reason, there stops the rule. Here, there's no reason not to allow this pool house to remain where it is. There's no good purpose, public or otherwise, served by a strict black and white enforcement of the rule in this case. A mistake was made, and we're making an appeal to you to legitimize it. The grant of this variance avoids a very significant expense. It prevents disruption to the neighborhood and of the neighbors. It allows me not to appeal the building commissioner's decision. and it can be made without substantial derogation to the purpose and intent of the bylaw or without any detriment to the public good. Thank you.
Is there anyone here today on Microsoft Teams that would like to speak in favor of this?
Yes, this is Bob Vogel. I would like to.
The lady who's approaching the microphone, please.
Can you hear me? Can I be heard?
No, it's not your turn, sir. There's a lady at the microphone who's going to speak.
Thank you.
Hi, Bob. Good evening. My name is Charlene Greenhalgh. I am an abutter along with my husband, Todd. We are very supportive of this request, and I know that doesn't mean a lot when you just say you're supportive. But I do strongly believe that this is a hardship for Bob Fogel and Ellen Mahoney, as this was not self-imposed. They hired people, professional people, to do the job correctly, and it wasn't. It was an error that was done. Things happen. But the hardship itself was not imposed by the applicants here. To move this shed would be a financial as well as a detriment to not only the Fogels and Mahoney household, but also the neighborhood. It quite honestly would be. They have been wonderful neighbors when they built their home. They were very respectful of all of us, but it would mean yet another summer of construction going on in the neighborhood. And this was the last lot to be built on in that neighborhood. We've been there for 33 years this past February. My husband built our house. And I do have to, and I absolutely have the utmost respect for Jay. I had the pleasure of working with Jay in Harwich. But I have to question if a variance is needed here at all. I was 33 years as a town planner. I was a zoning enforcement officer here in Chatham. I am speaking from experience, not from emotion of being a neighbor who actually really likes our neighbors, but from a basis of knowledge of zoning and planning. That the property is located in the R60 zoning district. It was created long before 1987, and within the dimensional schedule, the minimum building / structure setback is 40 feet from the road and 25 from the abutters. However, that infamous footnote 7 states, except that for lots in existence prior to May of '87, a road setback of 30 feet and an abutter setback of 20 feet shall be required. The setback requirement does not differentiate between accessory structures or principal structures. There is no differential between there. And I'm pretty positive, going back years ago when I was a zoning enforcement officer, assistant zoning enforcement officer, from 1987 through 1993, we did not share that interpretation of the bylaw the way it is now. I don't know how it morphed into that, to be honest. But I am supportive of this variance, as is my husband, because we do believe that this is a true hardship, for the applicant as well as the neighborhood. It's going to be extremely expensive to do the change that would need to be done. I know that Bob shared with you photographs of the property, as well as a letter. I'll let that speak for itself, but I think that's a strong indication of why this does deserve a variance. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of this application? The applicant? Yes, sir, you're on now.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just also want to say, look, I co-own this lot with my lovely wife, Ellen Mahoney. I have been a public servant for over 40 years. Ellen has been an administrator in high.
Unfortunately, we're having trouble understanding you. We're having trouble understanding you.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
I'm saying that my wife, Ellen Mahoney, and I've been a public servant for 40 years. Ellen has been an administrator of higher ed for over 40 years. We've been saving on scrimping for 20 years. We are not super wealthy people to be able to build our dream retirement home in Chatham. This would be a significant financial hardship on us to reroute and replace all of the utilities, including gas, electrical, French drains, drainage from the lot next door to provide for proper drainage from the septic and leaching field at 8 Power Lane, as well as replacing the irrigation system, landscaping, removing pool decking, and resetting caissons for the shed overhang. It will come at a time when my wife is in grave critical illness with bacterial meningitis. As a result, we will have significant medical and other as we try to relocate to 9 Power Lane. I also want to point out that the original building plans for this lot had all of the house and the outbuildings on them, and they were approved by the town of Chatham with a 20-foot setback. Later, we were told by the building department for our contractor that it only applied to the original structure, the new house, and not just the other buildings, ergo this Section 7 that people are talking about, or whatever it is. We worked very hard and diligently to comply with that. We also worked with all our neighbors throughout this process to make sure that the design, the view, the setbacks of all the parts, talk to all our neighbors, even before construction, showing them the lot plans, the plot plans, the plans for all of the structures, to make sure that they had no concerns, and actually made adjustments to things like retaining walls and other things to provide the best views. We have had a great deal of support from all our neighbors and do not feel there's a detriment to the neighborhood in any way. In fact, as you know, with the 50-foot setbacks and the original development, most of the lots and many of the homes in this area are within 15-foot setbacks. We are much greater than 15 at all parts of the lot, including the shed at 22 feet. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor?
There's no one else in the audience.
Okay. Well, the gentleman has written a very long letter for himself and his wife, and I think he has, Mr. Litchfield, I believe I don't need to reiterate anything by reading it. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate that the board members have all read the correspondence from Bob Ellen, and we would waive the further reading.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone in the audience or in Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak against this or has a specific question? If so, please indicate now you'd like to join the meeting.
There's no one with a question or opposition.
Okay, so we'll have questions from the board. Lee?
I actually don't have any questions right now.
Okay, Paul?
I have no questions.
I don't have any questions.
No questions.
Well, I have a question, and I think it would be to Mr. McGrath.
Jamie
So,
McGrath from Pine Harbor Wood Products, the builder, obviously.
Right, and we remember you from.
Yes.
Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
My question is very simple, I think. You placed it in a certain area. Did you place it there because the homeowner instructed you to put it there? Or you placed it there because you felt that's where it should go?
We placed it there because it was where it was on the original plan. Had the pool been, and I don't need to throw our pool builder under the bus, he's probably involved in this, watching anyway. If the pool was in the right location, the shed would have been in the right location. We had had it staked professionally. This is the original, and I don't think Bill mentioned this, but it got brought up, I think I did. There was a step that got added to a deck. That's where everything went awry here. The original plan was, I don't think we need to pull it up, but there was an original plan that showed a measurement on that one particular corner. I am gonna say it's the northeast corner of the pool, where there was originally no step. When Jeff went back to put the pool in, he measured from the deck. They had added a step. He measured from the step. It changed the angle of the pool just on that one side, which kicked the pool a little bit. When it kicked the pool, because we were 16 feet behind the pool, we were worse than the pool. The pool was off by 5-6 inches, I believe it was. That variance was granted. Because we were 16 feet back and it canted the whole project, we then became 3 feet. If, in fact, we are in violation, we became 3 feet out of, from the setback. And it was really only because the angle of the pool. It was always meant to be centered on the pool. We centered it on the pool. It was professionally staked. We had done a proposed plan. This was, unfortunately, it was, but when the pool got screwed up, we got screwed up. And we didn't realize that, obviously. I don't even think the shed required an as-built plan. The pool, I think, did. The surveyor put the pool shed on there. That's when we were made aware of the situation. As a building under 200 square feet, it's not really even a building permit. I think it's more of a shed registration. At least most towns are in Chatham. I think they follow the same guidelines. It's not actually building permit. It's a zoning registration in most instances because it's an under 200 square foot structure. So we probably didn't even need to be shown on the as-built plan, but when it did show up, that's when we found out about the situation, and obviously that's why we're here.
So if I can sum up what you said, your error was a compound of the pool installer's error.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
And it wasn't your client's.
We pulled all of our measurements off the pool. When the pool, and if we have this in the application, you can see the proposed and the as-built, and it was just, when the pool got kicked, the other end of the pool is fine. It was just that one corner that got moved 12 to 16 inches because of the step that got added. And as we changed the angle, and then of course, I think we end up being about 12 feet back from the pool, and then we're 16 feet deep. We're 28 feet from the edge of the pool, which is the reason the pool was 3 inches off, or 5 or 6 or whatever it was. And as we moved back 26 feet because of the angle that was, we're 26 feet behind the edge of the pool. That's when the 3 feet came into play.
Okay. Thank you very much. You're welcome. No questions? Paul?
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
I second that.
Then we need a vote. Lee?
Yes.
Paul votes yes.
Yes.
Ginny votes yes.
And I vote yes. Okay. Paul?
Well, this is a continued hearing, and at the time of the initial hearing on this particular thing, on the 26th of February, I indicated that I would support the application for the variance. As it turns out, Mr. Litchfield brought me back to high school English, if you can believe that, because he talked about Porsche and the speech, the quality of mercy is not strained. Well, it also goes on to say, it droppeth as the gentle rain upon the place beneath. Again, high school. Hard to believe it's still around, isn't it? But I think one of the things that Mr. Litchfield has contributed here, aside from that reference, is new information. And that involves footnote 7 and his advocacy on behalf of the client. It's, to me, an example of how an attorney can be very effective in presenting a case where the client doesn't necessarily have the background or the resources to go into it. And I'm proud of that, frankly. So I'll continue to vote, as I said. I have no other questions.
With that lead in, Randy.
Yeah, well, I agree with Paul, and I wasn't voting for the original, actually, the original variance. I wasn't voting, but it was 5-0. You got your variance. And Dave wasn't here. But it was 5-0, and Buck voted for it as well. And unfortunately, you weren't all here together, because if you had been, I think it would have just been, automatic. And now this homeowner has gone through a lot of anxiety and a lot of expense just to get here again. So I would have voted for yes in the first place, but not because I'm a compassionate person, I mean, that's arguable, but because I think, and I thought, and I still do think, that you met the criteria. We don't have to have Paul called it thin last time, the soil, and owing to those conditions of criteria number 1. He said it was thin, but thin works. And whether it's thin, thick, or automatic, or obvious, or ipso facto, you've met that criteria based on this board as a general rule. And the other two are pretty automatic. They're easy to meet for almost anyone. So I'm going to support it.
Jenny?
Yeah, taking a look, I think the as-built image here clearly demonstrates what Mr. McGrath was articulating a moment ago. Shows how the southerly side of the pool tapers off. And it's been established that it was really a good faith effort by Mr. McGrath, and that it was not the homeowner's fault. I do think you can make the case that it's a hardship to the homeowner. The relief without detriment, and the neighbors have been supporting it. And then the third, circumstances peculiar to land or structure. It was interesting how, I think it was Mr. Litchfield said the pool. I hadn't thought of that before. The pool is really a structure. So I would vote to support it.
Lee?
Well, first of all, I wanted to send prayers and good wishes to Ellen Mahoney and hope that she makes a full and fast recovery. I also wanted to commend Attorney Litchfield for his presentation. I thought it was excellent. Certainly educated me on a number of things. It's clear it was a mistake. It probably won't happen again. And I think that given the circumstances of the pool house with all of the utilities and the drains and everything else, it was going to be a tough one to move. It's going to cost a lot, and it's going to probably mean they don't use the pool this summer. So given all of that information, I do believe that this application meets the criteria for a variance, and I would vote in favor.
Yeah, I'm not the first one to vote for a variance, but certainly I think the land qualifies in my mind. Particularly, as I understand it, they had to do a lot of reshaping of that. And then when you want to put in the pool, it adds that. And I asked Mr. McGrath the question that I did because I wanted to find out in my own mind to make sure that it wasn't the homeowner who directed that pool house be there. And I'm satisfied by Mr. McGrath's answer that the homeowners did not instruct anybody to put it there. So therefore, they have a true hardship. And, never mind the monies, but just the hassle of this whole thing and all that. So, Paul, I think we need a vote.
I will move to approve the application as submitted.
Second.
We need a vote. Lee?
I vote yes.
Paul votes yes.
Yes.
Ginny votes yes.
And I vote yes. That's a unanimous decision, Mr.
Thank you very
Litchfield.
much. We appreciate it.
Okay. I don't think there's anything else to come before the meeting today. What do you?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, we need a vote?
Yes.
Paul votes yes.
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 And yes. Thank you, one and all. There you go. Don't forget, Randy, Thursday, what time?